Hello everyone. In today's video I will answer a question that I saw in the comments of one of my last videos, and the question it was asked by Marcus Baker. He asked, I'd love to see once as in videos on how to improve not just games and analysis but training methods, how best to spend your time and ways to enjoy the game. Well, the last part of the question, like the ways to enjoy the game, well, I can't really answer that because that just depends on, well, on everyone individually. But I can answer, I guess, on how you can work on improving and like what you should work on first, etc. I made a little note for myself, and I divided the topic into three categories. For like people who are rather new to the game, or like beginners, whatever you want to call it, for people who know a bit more, and for people who know a bit no more than a bit more. Uh, so let's start with the beginners. So first of all, if you want to get better, you have to play a lot. If you have ladder anxiety and you are too afraid to play the game, well, you're not going to get better. I guess that's not really news to you. You're not really going to get better by just watching streams and stuff like that. All that is going to happen is you will think that you know a lot about the game, and all you do is lack the mechanics. I mean, I've heard that one before, but the reality is you have to play a lot, and yes, otherwise you're just not going to get better. You will just think you are better than other people, while in reality you are not. Then, second, when you play a lot, you need to learn all the hotkeys. Don't click upgrades, don't click the zealot, because you don't have much to do anyway. Don't ever click anything that you can do with a hotkey. You really need to learn all the hotkeys for every upgrade in the game, for every unit, and yes. Also learn how to use, like how to do certain commands with your units. For example, if you build larva, if you build units with your larva, what you can do is you press Control left click on all the X, and then you press Shift 1 to add all the X to all the X that are building right now to your control grid for your units, or to 2 whatever units you're building. For example, if I have my mutas on 2, I already have 10 mutas and I'm building 5 more. I build 5 mutas, I press Control left click on the X, then I press Shift 2, and then I think you have to remake the group. I'm never sure about that from the top of my head, because I just do it like out of habit. But anyway, I think you have to do Shift 2 and then Control 2. I'm not sure about the last step anyway. And so those kind of things, like how do you remove units from a group, how do you add units to a group, then you need to think about how do you want to organize your control groups. And these you have to, I think it's good to ask other people about it, like how they do it, because that's something that has to work long term. For example, if you play Zerg, you can't do something like all units on 1, all hatcheries on 2, and all queens on 3. That just doesn't work, because you need more than one group for units. I would recommend 3 or 4. I personally have been using 4 from like beta days on, and I think I've been doing quite well with it, but I personally have big hands, and if you have smaller hands you might not be able to reach 5 and 6 as comfortably on the keyboard. So I can just quickly tell you how I do it. I have units on 1 to 4. Usually I have like I have whatever units I want to engage first on 1, and then units that I want to have to engage second on 2, and on 3 I often have like stuff like spellcasters or banelings that I want to use during the fight, while the rest is on A move, because you can't really micro that much in many cases. And 4, I have like stuff like a group of Zerglings for run-bys, or overlords for drops, stuff like that. 5 the hatcheries, and 6 the queens. Obvious. On 7 I have at the beginning my spawning pool to research Zergling speed, and once Zergling speed is being researched, I put the whatever amount of Evo chambers I have on 7. On 8 I put a Nidus Worm, and 9 and 0 I don't use, because those are too hard to reach. So once you have figured those things out, like the whole grouping thing, you might do at the end of your beginner stage, then you just want to learn like what does every unit do. Like just play the game, learn what abilities do the units have, and you should also play the other races, even if you don't like any other race than the one you choose to play. I really recommend you to play a decent amount of games with the other races, just to know what do the units do exactly, what upgrades does the race have, and just like how does it feel to play Terran if you're playing Zerg. And for example, something you might learn is that actually run-bys are fucking annoying if you're playing Terran, and that's something you can also use later on when you play Zerg. But anyway, it's really important just to play the other races a little bit, also to know how much does which unit cost, and how are the tech paths and so on. So once you've figured out hotkeys and those kind of basic things, don't think too much about build orders and such at those stages. I mean, you can watch some VODs or replays to get a basic build order, but you're probably going to fuck it up horribly anyway. So just get a bit into the game, get a bit of a feeling, and in the next stage, which I call the mediocre stage, but mediocre is actually already too positive. I mean, just because you're a little less bad doesn't mean all too much. People in that stage, at least from my experience, they have the tendency to overestimate themselves. For example, they think their build order is good, that they copied that build from from a pro or whatever, or that they made up their own great build. Those are the worst people. Please don't think that you can make up your own build orders, because you really you don't have a clue about the game, and if you want to play to win and if you want to improve, then you just have to copy other people. I mean, maybe to some people that's quite sad to hear, but that's how it is. If you want to get better, at first you have to copy the people that are already good, and then once you arrive somewhere around the top, then you can think about your own builds. But even then, most people at the top just copy also. So yes, you should try to be humble. Don't whine too much about imbalance and such if you are in silver or gold, because to be honest, that doesn't really matter down there. And really don't overestimate your own knowledge. It's always safe to assume that you don't have a clue, and that you should really just try to look at what people who have a clue do in the game. So I would recommend that you pick up one solid build order. Solid means not a one base all in, maybe. Maybe you can play a one base all in one matchup, but I would really recommend that you pick up a solid build order for every matchup. For example, let's say for Terran against Protoss, you play a 1 Rex expansion into 3 barracks into Medivacs, and then once you Medivac spawn, you put down another command center and an eBay or two. I think you can also build the eBay a bit earlier. But anyway, something like that, like a 1 Rex expansion, and then maybe some kind of pressure or an earlier third. That's up to you, but don't just go for some kind of all in, because I think that's not. I mean, you can practice all ins later when you play when you got better and when you play against people more than one game in a row. But realistically, at the beginning, if you play ladder, you will never meet the same opponent twice, most likely. So just play something solid. For example, TVZ. You could play 1 Rex expansion, Reactor Hellions, and then Cloak Banshee. Then put down a third command center and 2 E-base. That's super standard and very safe. And in TVT, to be honest, I don't have much clue about TVT, what the most solid openings. But I guess something like 1 Rex expansion, or something like 1-1-1 into an expansion, like Banshee expansion. I guess TVT does quite many builds, but I think someone else has a better clue. For ZVZ, I guess hedge first without gas into the 6 queen opening against Zerg, and against Protoss, of course, you have to learn no gas 3 base, like early third base, and then into Roach Link to defend against 2 base all-ins, and then if your opponent gets a 3rd base, you just go to Brutaloids, I guess. And ZVZ, I would recommend to learn 2 base Muta, and then switch into Roach Infestor. For Protoss, I honestly don't have enough clue about Protoss to comment all that well, so I just skipped that part. So next, once you've decided on what build you want to play, you play that build every game. Well, depending on the race, of course, and you don't like. You don't go away from your build order, and you really just try to perfectionize the timings. Like oftentimes when I watched people in, like, let's say like platinum or diamond, they were thinking that it's perfectly okay to put their cybernetics score like 5 seconds after their gateway finished, but that's like losing 5 seconds in your tech, and that's something that should never ever happen. So you really want to like get every step as efficient as possible in your build. You don't want to have any downtimes. And really get where you want to get as quickly as possible. And well, that will take you many hundreds of games. So you should really play the same build a few hundred times to really get that, well, not perfect, but at least somewhat close to it. So yes, I think once you have one build order down really well, and of course you will make some experience, like how the games develop later on, and what kind of adjustments you have to make. Of course, you have to implement scouting, but scouting is a very complicated topic. I'm not really sure where to include that. That's why I left it out here. You should definitely scout, but that's something you really need to like develop a feeling for, and I can't really like put that in a video, to be honest. So once you've learned a build order rather well, you want to develop like a real game plan. I think there's a pretty big difference between a game plan and like a build order. For example, you can execute a build order up to a certain point pretty well, but then you have no clue what to do then. And I already just gave an example of a game plan in ZVP. For example, you go 3 base without gas, then you take 2 gases at 6 minutes, go layer, circling speed, take 2 more gases, and so on. And then you see what your opponent does. And then there's basically, you have to have like a how do you say, like a tree in your head that branches out in different directions. For example, like the beginning is always the same, and then there's one branch. Your opponent goes, he doesn't take a 3rd and a 4th gas. That means you build units very early on, and because he is rather likely to try to all-in you with gateways. Of course, it's not that simple, but like that could be one branch. And the next branch is your opponent just stays on 2 base for a while, and then what do you do? I would recommend to just build Roach Ling and try like use an overseer to see what he does and then react accordingly. I mean, there are super many variations, then I can't cover them all here. And I guess the last option is that your opponent takes a 3rd base, and then you just, there's basically 2 branches if your opponent takes a 3rd base. Either you get very aggressive with Roach Ling, or you could go Roach Ling and then transition into Mutalisks. But anyway, the one branch is to be aggressive, and you have to commit to it. Like you don't want to like mix 2 branches ever, because that's really bad. Like that's being indecisive, and that loses many games for many people on all levels. So if your opponent, if you see the Nexus starts to build, or if you scout the Nexus being built like halfway, whatever, you immediately make a decision. Either you get aggressive, or you go for fast Brute Lords. There's the only 2 options basically. And it's really important that you don't start to get confused, that you build Roach Ling, but at the same time put down an Infestation Pit and start to take to Hive. Because that doesn't make any sense, but I see that rather often from people in Diamond or whatever. They just think it's okay to build some Roach Ling for whatever reason. I mean, they don't really know what they are doing anyway. But yes, like they just do it because maybe they've seen that somewhere, like from whoever, and they just build some units and take to Hive, but they don't build that many drones either. But that's really bad. You need to have like a really strict game plan, and you need to commit to it. So either you go drones only, fast Hive, double Evo, well, of course, Infestor upgrade, and then after, like, you go to around 90 to 100 drones, take a 4th base, of course, and then you build spines against the inevitable push that he will try to do before you have Brute Lords. Or you try to kill him, or at least do a lot of damage shortly after he has taken his 3rd base. And for that, you should not be building drones, you should not take a 4th base, but you should build Roach Ling, or just go very quickly for the Spire and then go Mutas. But that's kind of tricky. For the start, I would really recommend to either go Roach Ling aggression or go for fast Hive. And generally, I like fast Hive better. I think Protoss players have gotten rather good at defending Roachling, but especially on lower levels it's something perfectly okay to do, because most likely they are not so good at defending it. But you should definitely also learn Fast Hive. Anyway, the important part here is that once you have gotten a certain information, you need to immediately make a decision in what branch of your game plan tree you go into, and don't be indecisive or mix two branches. That's super important. And another thing that I have seen to be quite a big flaw, like from like diamond-ish players or so. I mean, that's a flaw that you obviously see on lower levels also, but that's one of the things that often holds them back, is that they overreact. For example, there's Zerg players that blindly build 2 Spore Crawlers in every base against Terran, because they probably got owned quite badly by Cloak Banshees a few times, and that led them to believe that they should always build 2 Spores in their bases, because otherwise they will just lose to Cloak Banshees if they come. But that's a big mistake. Because that's simply an overreaction. It's okay to build 1 or 2 spores blindly if you can't get scouting information, but you should try to get scouting information, and you should think about in what cases a Cloak Banshee can actually come. For example, if you see that your opponent has quite a few Marines with an Overlord that is like at his natural, then you certainly don't need to be afraid of Cloak Banshees, and you don't want to build spores. So one of the things you should be looking at is don't overreact to things. If there's a bunker building at your natural, don't pull all your drones. Just pull the right amount. Pull like 4, 5, but don't overreact. It's very important, because if you overreact to something, in the end it can, even if you defend it, you are still behind. So that's something that's very important, and that I mean, I've coached a few people, and I've sometimes noticed that that's something that holds people back quite a bit. Because they overreact to certain things, and they overreact so much that they are behind no matter what happens afterwards. Even if their opponent flies the Banshee straight into the spores and it dies, they are still behind. So yes, I think that's all for today. If you have any questions or about the things I said, or any suggestions about topics in the future, please leave a comment, and please subscribe to my channel if you like my videos. Goodbye, guys.